And so today, for those of you, I think some of you have been to school support network meetings in the past. For those of you, this is your very first school support network, what we're going to do today is do some welcome and introductions. And then we're going to, the great majority of our time together will be spent with Christa Tinari, who'll be leading us through a conversation around handling difficult conversations. So we're really so looking forward to that. And you'll be a bit more about Christa in the presentation in a minute. Then we're going to be sharing a couple of statewide resources and then some dates for your calendar. So that's kind of how today's going to be scheduled. But before we get going, it's always so helpful to know who you're in the room with. And so we're going to be doing some introductions. And just quickly, my name's Liz. I'm the co-founder and co-director of the School Culture and Climate Initiative. And my colleague there's Trish, um, is based at, well, we're all based at St. Elizabeth University, where we co-direct and co-founded the School Culture and Climate Initiative. Trish is going to say a few words about herself in a minute. But I'm also the president of SEL4NJ, and later on we'll be sharing some details about SEL Day with you as well. And we'll also be sharing more details about the School Culture and Climate Initiative. But before we do that, Trish, do you just want to say hi and say a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Liz. As Liz said, she and I have been working together for well over a decade. And we are housed at St. Elizabeth University in Morristown, New Jersey. I am a dean and professor of psychology at the university, and I founded our Center for Human and Social Development. And it's out of that center that we do a lot of supports for pre-K to 12 educators, including the work that the School Culture and Climate Initiative does in specifically offering these school support network workshops at no cost. We also co-founded the School Culture and Climate Initiative, as I said earlier, that's out of the center. And finally, in partnership with Maurice Elias at Rutgers University, the center has an online academy for social emotional learning in schools, where we offer 2 certificate levels of training on how to incorporate and integrate social emotional learning, processes to improve and make climates in schools as positive as they can be, where everyone feels a sense of belonging and voice. And so that is me, sort of in a nutshell. And I'm very, very happy to be here. Another opportunity that we provide are our coffee chats. So more about that when we close out. But back over to you, Liz.
Great. Thank you, Trish. And an important part of this, of course, important, critical, the heartbeat is our team and the wonderful consultants who are part of the team and our colleague Leanne. So just want to give a huge shout out to that because this is all about people and it's all about what people bring to the table. And we are ever so grateful. So here's just a quick visual of the School Culture and Climate Initiative for as Trish mentioned, we're at St. Elizabeth University. We've been working with schools for over 15 years in a wide variety of ways. So super happy to connect with anyone if you're interested in professional development, SEL coaching, if you're interested in a really intentional approach to school climate improvement. Just give us a ring, contact us. Super happy to connect. We started out in New Jersey, working also in sort of southern New York State, increasingly in the Midwest, and occasionally throughout the years, spotted across the United States as well. So we do have a Midwest regional director as well. So enough about us. So the School Support Network, I guess, is a little bit more about us, but but not much. We're about to transition in. The whole idea is connection, and it originally was in person before COVID. It was a wonderful way just for schools to connect with one another. So during COVID, we transitioned and pivoted to a virtual sort of delivery system, which is what this is. But we really felt the opportunity to engage and to talk and to share sort of informally was so valuable. So that's where we established our coffee chats. And these coffee chats are scheduled usually every Wednesday morning. Trish and I are on one or another coffee chat, but we have some for school administrators, which we had this morning, another for school counselors, another for ESL educators. And it's really an open forum for those in those roles to come together and find out what's on other people's radar screens, to share successes, to share challenges, like get some advice from colleagues who might have a slightly different perspective or different experience. These are provided at no cost. And if you've signed up for the School Support Network, you're probably getting the emails that have the registration links for these coffee chats. Really encourage you to attend and or send it along to a colleague. Those that do attend seem to find great value in them. And again, it's a way for us to create space to bring people together, which is just ever so important. So now I really think, yes, that's it about us. And just to start out today, maybe if you could just indulge us maybe and just share 2 words to describe how you're feeling today in the chat. That's my dog, Gus. He's actually on that sofa as I'm speaking. He's actually upside down snoring at the moment. But just a little lightness into the conversation. But if you could just share in the chat, that would be great. Just 2 words about how you're feeling today, this Wednesday towards the end of February. Trish, I can't see it, so can you kind of monitor it? Yeah.
Sure. Stretched, grateful but tired, busy and hopeful. Spring is coming, Michelle. I believe it too. Recuperating and hopeful. Christa, good to hear that you're recuperating. Hopeful and excited to be with everybody and with the sun. Harried and excited, Jennifer. Buzzing and busy. What a combination. Leah, thanks.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing it. We always, it's always such a good exercise for us all just to check in with ourselves, like, oh, how am I doing? Like, what am I feeling? What's going on? And then also it's so helpful to know what's going on with other people because there's a whole lot under the surface and we can all carry so many complex feelings all at the same moment. So thank you so much for indulging and sharing. So we now have a poll because we're always so curious as to what kind of mix and combination of people we have. So if you could do the poll, that would be great. I think you can all see that.
You got some variety at level of school, which is great. Nice. We have elementary represented, middle, high school, no district level. Well, there we are, a couple of district level people as well. So it's great to see that variety in the room. School counselors, school administrator, school nurse, and teacher. So another great collection of people in terms of position. And we have almost a 60-40 split with 60% saying that it is not the first SSN meeting. So welcome back and welcome to those folks who have joined us for the first time.
Great. Well, this is sort of music to our ears because we, over the years, have worked really hard. It's been a really strong focus of us to make sure that these school support network meetings, that the offerings are really applicable for K through 12 and that they're really applicable to different roles within a school. And to do both of those things is actually harder than it sounds because, there's worlds of material and resources and great advice across the board. So whenever we get a spread, our goal is to have a spread like this. So every month we don't know whether we succeeded. So it's really it feels good for us because we feel it's helpful for people in different roles at different levels to be hearing similar messages. So with that said, welcome, welcome. It is just great you guys are all here. And for the people who are new, just so you know, everything will be shared at the end of this meeting. We'll be sharing the PowerPoint, we'll be sharing resources. If things come up in a conversation in the chat that people are mentioning good resources, we'll send those out. So we really are trying to provide you with as much easy to access information that's related to this session as possible. So just to let you know, and I am going to. Right, so on to what we are really here for today, which is we are just thrilled that Christa Tinari is able to join us again. I think, Christa, you have been a friend of Skizzy for at least 10 years, I think. And it's been wonderful working with Christa throughout the years and getting to know her. And we're just so thrilled that she's within our orbit and that we're within her orbit. And it's great when we kind of cross paths. So we're thrilled that Christa's here today. And I just can't think of anyone who's more skilled or where it's more appropriate to be sharing this topic of handling difficult conversations. Christa seems to embody the kind of kindness that is needed in this world. So really thrilled to have Christa. And I think with that said, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Christa, to kind of take us away, if that's okay.
Yes. Thank you so much, Liz and Trish and Leanne, for your warm welcome. As always, it's wonderful to be here. And I also want to additionally welcome again everyone who's able to be with us live on this call and also those who might be viewing the video later. I will also just give a very brief introduction just because, as you said, it's good to know who's who. And I saw somebody is checking in from Briarwood School in Florham Park. That is my hometown. I went to Briarwood School in the 1980s, so I'm sure it's changed a lot since then. But I am from New Jersey, grew up there, grew up in Florham Park, went to public schools there. And I later was a student assistance counselor at South Brunswick High School. I got my my SAC certification at TCNJ. And my bachelor's degree is in psychology, and my master's is in international peace studies and conflict resolution. I went to School for International Service in Washington, D.C. And I became very, very interested in violence prevention and social emotional learning, conflict resolution, because of some personal experiences that I had in my life where I was seeking tools to live a fuller life, having experienced some traumatic incidents. And very, very early on in my career, I had a teaching internship in a DC public school, and there was a shooting, and 2 students were killed. And it really was a experience for me that led me to a commitment to the career that I've had since then in the work that I do on school climate and violence prevention and peace education. So that was in 1999 or 2000 when that happened. So I've been doing the work for 25 years, and I've had the privilege of working with public, charter, religious, private schools all over the United States and also in 40 different countries. And what I can say, having done that, is that educators and anyone who's working with young people, counselors, administrators, all the paras, everybody who's involved are just people that I admire greatly to the depth of my being. I was also raised by 2 educators, so I have that in my blood. So it's just a real pleasure for me to connect with you all and to, have this conversation and maybe provide something that potentially could be useful for you at this point in time. So lovely to be here. And I'm going to share my screen now, so just give me a moment to pull up my presentation, and then we will get started with that. Okay. So can you see my screen now? Okay, fantastic. So I just wanted to briefly share what the goals are for this particular presentation. And the first would be to just reflect on the challenges and opportunities available to us in this moment. It is a moment. We're having a moment in the United States and in education, and I'm sure everyone's feeling it from your own perspective and your own point of view. And so, since we're discussing dialogue, I wanted to invite that into our conversation today. I'll also be presenting the differences between dialogue and debate, and then we will learn about the principles and practices of dialogue and some dialogue tools that hopefully can help you navigate challenging conversations at school. As was mentioned, of course, we have folks who are working with 5-year-olds and folks who are working with high school students. So the way that you apply these skills will be a bit different, of course. I'm very happy to take your questions as we go along. So please feel free to write any questions you have in the chat. And I will invite Trish or Liz or whoever's monitoring chat if you want to wave me down at any time and say we've got a burning question that relates to something I was just talking about. Please let me know. I'm very happy to do that. So as I was thinking about doing this presentation, which I have done before many times throughout my career, it was a little more challenging this time because of the social political context of what's going on right now in the United States and how it's impacting education. And education as a space that I think we can probably agree is a space where we want to help our students learn how to engage as participants in civil society, in a democracy. And of course, all of you care so deeply about social emotional skills, and those skills help us engage with one another in productive ways. So I was thinking, is this relevant now at this point in time? And I know that it is, but I was having my own doubts. And so I just wanted to share with you, just so you can, know a little bit about where I'm coming from, is that dialogue does not require abandoning your values. And I know sometimes people can feel like it might, because when you feel very strongly about something, it's a natural human inclination to want to fight for your point of view or your perspective and to get your point across. And so rest assured that dialogue has to do with connecting to our values, actually, and not abandoning them. It does require emotional awareness, self-control, courage, boundary setting, and a resistance to dehumanization. That resistance starts internally. It has to be a commitment that you have within yourself, that you are allowing for the humanity of someone else to be present, even when that person is doing something or saying something with which you disagree. And so dialogue invites us to a place where we want to understand people more deeply. And also in using dialogue, we can understand ourselves more deeply as well. So I do believe that there's a place for dialogue, and through it, we can practice some of these very important skills that can help us improve our lives and improve society and improve the situation for our students at school. So since I mentioned values, I just wanted to invite everyone on the call to take a moment and just connect back to what motivated you to work in education. What are your hopes and goals for your students now? Maybe it's changed a little bit throughout your career. And what values guide your personal and professional presence? And that presence is really who you are, that you bring to not only the classroom or your students or your school, but to your colleagues, your parents, and your community. And so I'll invite you to just take a get into a comfortable position for a moment and just check in with yourself about that. What are your motivations? What are your hopes and goals for your students now? And what values guide your personal and professional presence? And if anyone would like to share in the chat, please feel free to do so. I'm asking these questions because for a lot of people working in education, these are our anchors. This is the grounding from which we can do our work. I see people are continuing to join us, so thanks for letting them in. Okay. It's okay if you don't want to share as well. This is also just a personal, reflection. So it's okay just to bring this with you as we move forward. Okay.
We have one.
Great, Trish.
Thank you, Leah, for sharing. I want my students to feel seen and understood. I also want them to feel curious about their feelings and the world around them. And Leslie shared the joy of seeing others succeed. Lovely touchstone.
Those are beautiful. Thanks for sharing those. Okay. So as you're holding that in mind, just hold that with you throughout our conversation today. And if you need to revisit that, please feel free. I had the opportunity to attend a wonderful webinar with Parker Palmer the other day. It was just a few days ago. You might be aware of him. He wrote The Courage to Teach and has been doing work on education for a long time. I think he's 85 or 86 years old now. But he brought up something that he speaks a lot about, which I think is important to keep in mind now. And it's called standing in the tragic gap. And the tragic gap is the space between how things are and how we feel or we know or we believe, we hope things could be. Right? So the world as it is and our idealized version. And what he says is this gap is always present. It never closes. And as educators, we stand in this gap. We stand in this space. And it can feel very challenging because we know, students can disagree respectfully, but in that moment, they're not doing it. Right? So we know there's a reality that can happen, but it's not always the reality that we experience. And so we're asked to hold the tension between the reality of the moment and the possibility that something better might emerge. And I think this is such an important thing to keep in mind as we think about engaging in dialogue, because when you engage in dialogue, you're entering into that space with a curiosity and an openness to the possibility of something new happening. And it might not be exactly what you want to have happen. It might not be the perfect or ideal version, right? But there's a possibility of something new and different and positive. And so I think this is where, perhaps especially now, a lot of us are finding ourselves kind of standing in this tragic gap. And that's just to know that we're all together in that right now, no matter what you believe or how you feel. We all are standing in that gap. Okay, so I want to dive right in then to debate and dialogue and just explain the differences between them. And I know a lot of schools use debate or have a debate club or a debate team. It's a very common technique for helping students learn how to engage in information acquisition and fact assessment, argument making, communication, etc. And for those reasons, debate can be very, positive and productive. But debate is not the best communication technique for all purposes. And I'll explain, a little bit more about why that is. So what is debate? It's an organized argument in which people discuss a topic from opposing sides, right? So these sides are usually identified. You're going to be pro, I'm going to be con, and we're going to find out our facts and information so that we can present those facts. So characteristics of debate include the following. It's competitive, which means in a debate, there's typically a winner and a loser. We don't say both people won at the end of a debate because the point is to win. A good debater listens for flaws in the other person's argument. And so your job is to listen with an ear towards what was wrong, perhaps a fact that wasn't quite right, an argument that is not quite the one you would make or incorrect in some way. And so your job in debate is to defend your own point of view with your own set of information, facts, viewpoints, etc., and to attack or listen to flaws for the other person's point of view and argument. And you may notice in debates sometimes perspectives are presented as facts. So there's often an overstatement of what the facts are. They're actually perspectives inserted in there for it. And it can include some what we might consider to be a little more aggressive communication techniques, like interruptions, rolling, accusations, a variety of nonverbal body language that is not entirely respectful. And basically those are, some of the main characteristics. So at the end of a debate, what are the outcomes? Like, what do we get? Usually the debaters are still convinced of their own point of view or their own position, their own belief. They haven't changed to take on the person who they were debating, their belief or point of view. And sometimes trust and cooperation may decrease because of the type of communication that's happening. And when there's people watching a debate or listening to a debate, usually we encourage those people to take sides. Okay, after hearing the arguments, which side do you agree with, the pro or the con, and why, right? And that's the whole point. Okay, so how is dialogue then a different type of communication technique? And it's quite different. So it's a communicative process through which people with different perspectives seek understanding. So the entire motivation and purpose of a dialogue type communication is to understand a perspective better than you did coming into that conversation, not to look for flaws or point out its mistakes or anything like that. So from the get-go, you can see that the purpose is entirely different. Some of the characteristics of dialogue include cooperative, respectful interactions. And those are usually created through following rules of engagement that I'll get to. There's people seeking to understand. The people engaged in dialogue acknowledge differences and explore each other's point of view. So if you hear something that you don't understand or doesn't sit right or you don't think makes sense, your job then is to try to ask questions to find out more about that person's experience and perspective. And those perspectives, by the way, are understood as a result of people's experiences rather than as just a set of facts, right? Because we all have our individual positionalities, our culture that impacts us, perhaps our spiritual perspectives, our family environment, what news we're reading, what has been our personal experience in any context, right? Our personality, our different abilities, disabilities, etc. All of these things then are filters through which we understand our day-to-day experiences and they impact our beliefs and our behaviors. So in dialogue, we really try to get a fuller picture of people as human beings. And this goes back to the commitment to not dehumanize. We try to get a fuller picture of why people believe what they believe and how they came to those conclusions and what types of experiences have they had. And when we do this, we also listen for common concerns and hopes. So one of the tenets of dialogue is an idea that as human beings, we have a common humanity, which means that most humans, we'll say most, I won't say all, I'll just say most, it covers almost everybody, don't want to suffer. We want to be happy. We want our children to be safe, right? We want our loved ones to be safe. We want to feel good about ourselves, right? These are human traits and characteristics, and we have a lot of needs in common. You know, we have a need for belonging, for community, for acceptance, to feel understood. These are all things that no matter who you are, you've experienced that in your life. And so throughout the dialogue process, we listen for common concerns, common hopes, and common human experiences that can help us build bridges to understand people a little bit better than we did before. So what are outcomes of dialogue, engaging in dialogue? Deeper reflection on one's own positions and beliefs. And the reason why you might, reflect more deeply on your own position and beliefs through dialogue is because of the types of questions that we ask in dialogue. Some of those questions really would cause you to reflect on, why is it that I feel that way? Or what some of my experiences have been that have led me to this belief or opinion. And through answering the question, you can gain new insights into yourself as well as the others involved in that conversation. You might have more consideration for another person's positions and beliefs, having heard where they're coming from. And it can increase respect, connection, and trust. This last part is extremely important because it kind of creates a positive feedback loop. In order for good dialogue to happen, we do need a baseline level of trust and connection, because dialogue asks us to share who we are, what we think, what we believe. And so it asks us to be a little bit vulnerable in that space, right? So the more that you're already doing in your classroom to create connections between your students, to help them get to know one another on a personal basis, to help them define parameters of respect that they want to engage in the classroom, the more you're creating a foundation, in which dialogue is possible. And if they can then practice dialogue with one another, then they're just strengthening that. They're strengthening, we had an experience where we were able to communicate productively and people were respectful and kind. And so it becomes more likely that it's possible that we can do it again. So it was my last point is just what I was saying. It leads to more cooperation and continued relationship. Just, I think probably something we all would like more of in the classroom. So there's many, many different dialogue tools out there. There's a lot of different structures of engagement. Erica gave a list of resources at the last meeting last month, because I watched that presentation and it was great. Like she gave a list of like the fishbowl technique and things like that. So if you didn't attend that presentation, I would recommend you view the video because it was really, really great. But I'm going to go over several different ones here. So the first thing is that we establish and follow ground rules in a dialogue. And my recommendation is that you come up with these ground rules with your students, by asking them questions like, how can we have a really positive and productive conversation together? What helps you feel listened to, right? What kind of body language shows you that your fellow students are listening, right? How do you like to feel at the end of a conversation? So having a really rich conversation with your students and then having them generate some ground rules for dialogue, which usually winds up including things like, listening actively and turn taking. And I'll go through a few more of them, but usually your students can come up with a great list. And as you begin to engage in dialogue, if there's anything that you need to add or that people start getting tripped up, you can pause and you can say, this seems like a time where we might want to think about our ground rules. And if we have everything on there, that would be helpful to us. Or if we might want to think about something we can add right now that would help us handle this conversation. And always pause and go back and add to your ground rules. And once you create a set of ground rules, it's really, really important you actually use them. So usually you'd want to write them out. You'd want to keep them visible. You'd want to invite students to review them before you get started with your conversation. And sometimes I even have students choose one or two that they want to especially focus on, and just reflect a moment on what they're going to do during that dialogue to follow that ground rule. Last thing is, it's really important to figure out what to do when the ground rules are broken. Because if you have ground rules and they're just broken left and right and nothing happens, then they're not really guiding the process, right? So that's another conversation that I recommend your students are involved in. You can invite them into what happens when anyone is not following a ground rule. What should we do? Should we take a pause? Should we review them again? Should we stop the dialogue and start it another time when people feel more ready? You know, what should be the consequence or the action that's taken if ground rules aren't followed? Okay. Another dialogue tool is sharing from personal experience. So you really want to encourage students to speak with one another that's sharing what it is that they know, they feel, they think, they believe, instead of what they've heard, someone else do or say. Now, they might refer to what someone else does or says, but you want to eventually have them connect that back to then how that impacts them, how that makes them feel. So everyone sort of agrees to share from personal experience. There's a commitment to listen with genuine curiosity. Somebody, who mentioned your goals for your students mentioned curiosity. So I really appreciate that. Curiosity involves questioning your assumptions. So we all make assumptions about everyone all the time. It's just a little function of our brain. Our brain likes to know things and likes to categorize people into boxes to make life more predictable. And it's important to know that our assumptions might be wrong. That I have a particular assumption about someone who, believes something, and so then it means X, Y, Z about them. I extrapolate then. Oh, because they believe this, then all these other things might be true. Those are assumptions that might be incorrect. So we have to be open to questioning our assumptions. Okay. Another dialogue tool is to summarize what's been said and to check for understanding. This is probably one of the most important dialogue tools, like you'll never see used in debate usually. So it's pretty simple. It's just basically saying, so far I've heard it said, or what I understand to be, and you just say what it is that you heard. And if two people are having a dialogue and it's not like a circle, it's not like a whole class, it's really great to ask the other person, so far I've heard you say that, you really don't think we should have school uniforms because it erases your ability to express your uniqueness, right? Okay, let's say they were discussing that. You would ask the person, is that right? So if it's two people, it's really great to ask when you've checked for understanding, to then ask, is that right? Did I get that correct? And if it wasn't exactly what they said, or they sort of meant it a little differently, then they can add to it and say, well, sort of, that's what I meant, but I also meant this, or what I really said was that. And that's a really great way to facilitate cooperative conversation, because each person is showing that not only are they listening, but they really have a strong desire to understand. And so they're reflecting back in their own words and then checking that they do understand. This is another one. It has to do with instead of disagreeing outright. So hopefully some of you teach your students ways to disagree agreeably. And this is one of those ways. So instead of telling someone, I think that's wrong, or that's just not right, or that's a terrible thing to think, or that's a horrible idea, you just instead suggest an alternative view that you have. Oh, what I've experienced is this. What I felt is this. Oh, I think about that a little bit differently, right? So you're just going to remove the part where you're telling the person that they're wrong and that you disagree entirely. And it changes the whole tenor of the conversation. People are much more willing to listen to you if you're just then sharing your own idea or experience or thought without criticizing or putting down theirs. Because when you do that, now they have a desire to defend, right, and tell you why they are right. And now we're just we move into debate instead of dialogue that way. And then finally, using questions for deeper understanding. Okay, so I'm going to go over a bunch of tools for that in a minute. The last point here is listen for communication at the feelings levels. Listen for commonalities at the feeling level. So you and I might have two totally different ideas about, a policy issue, let's say now, but we both might be fearful about something happening, about harm coming to our family. And so the commonality we have there is our concern or our fear about something, even though our idea about something is quite different. And so when you listen for commonalities at the level of feeling, then people can still appreciate the fact that they're experiencing a discomforting emotion. It's motivating them to act a certain way or believe a certain thing. And so at least you're connecting on that level of common humanity. Okay. This is an example of rules, ground rules that was called success criteria in this particular classroom. The students came up with this, but again, you can come up with whatever list you like to. Okay, I'm going to go over the questions because they're really important, and then we're going to have some breakout space time. Okay, so dialogue questions are always trying to uncover understanding again, right? So they're not yes or no questions, right? They're open-ended questions. What do you think inclusion means, for example? I'm just going to use the word inclusion as an example. We can say that word, belonging. Let's use the word belonging. What do you think belonging means, right? What concerns you about belonging? What matters most to you about belonging? What do you wish others knew about belonging? How does belonging impact you? And what experiences have led you to believe, feel, think that belonging is important, for example, right? What have you heard that you resonate with? This is a question you can ask after there's maybe a circle dialogue and you've had one go around. What connections do you see about what's been said, even when maybe different viewpoints were expressed? What perspectives are missing from this dialogue? Are there other points of view that just haven't even been expressed yet, either by people who are there or by those who are just missing from that particular space? How would you like belonging to be experienced in our classroom, for example? That's how do you like blank to be? And what do you hope others understand about what you believe, think, feel, or have said? What's the most important thing you'd like others to understand? By the way, even little kids can actually think about this question. And a lot of times little kids come back to, emotions that they're experiencing. I want so-and-so to understand that I'm upset about this. So these are dialogue questions that, as you can see, they're really aimed at this level of deeper understanding. Okay, so I just went through a lot. We talked about characteristics of debate, characteristics of dialogue. Um, we talked about some dialogue sort of general tools, and we talked about some questions that you can use. And so I wanted to pause here and sort of let the group uh, respond to this a little bit, connect with one another in a small group. And I think what we can do is maybe if we break for like, I would say like 7 or 8 minutes. Let's do that. So it'll be short. And Leanne, maybe we can do I don't know if you did groups yet, but maybe we can do smaller groups, like 2 or 3, so that people have a chance to talk.
I have them in
Yep.
rooms here. Most of them are 4. Do you want me to
Okay.
send a
That's
pair
fine.
down?
We can do that. Let's do 8 minutes and groups of 4, and just to think about, you can reflect on anything that we've discussed so far. What are things that do make a conversation difficult, and what SEL skills are needed to engage in a productive conversation? I actually mentioned some of them. They were sort of embedded in there. So if you could discuss that in your small group. And then when we come back, I have a process to share with you that is a restorative circle process that I want to go over before we end today. Do I have about till 2:15?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Any questions before we move into small groups? Okay.
All right, here we go.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, as you're coming back in. Thanks so much for participating in that conversation. I'm going to open the floor for a moment and see if anyone has a few words you want to share, any thoughts coming to mind. I think it's always so beneficial when you get to hear from one another.
Should I talk or should I type?
That's Leah, yes?
Yes.
Sure, Leah, you can speak.
We were talking a little bit about curiosity, and then we were also talking about the importance of wonderment and being curious, and just how it's very hard now to have that, especially with technology and finding answers right away, and our phones is on us all the time, to have that opportunity to be curious.
I love that. Do you work with younger students?
K-5.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because it's such a wonderful just starter for anything. I wonder, what if we do this? What if we do that? I do that at home with cooking with my 10-year-old, and there's another adult in the household who's kind of wants us to just I feel like sometimes just like follow what the recipe says, but I'm like, well, I wonder what will happen if we if we do this, and make some guesses and try it. And I always say it's an experiment, we're gonna see. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to bring up with respect to like other people around us. Like we don't know. We can't assume that we know who everyone is, and we're learning about each other and we're discovering new things, and to have that bring that sense of wonder and curiosity to it is really lovely. Thanks for that, Leah. Would anyone else like to share?
Yes. Hi, Christa.
Hi.
I was thinking with the question that was up on the screen, that what makes conversations difficult. I was thinking of power dynamics and that fear of conflict, and how do you overcome that? How can you have difficult conversations and say things in a way that
Yes, Leslie, thank you. Yes, power dynamics are ubiquitous. They're always there. They shift and change depending on what context we're in. So you might feel you have more power in one environment and another, and less power in a different environment. And they also can be operating at different levels in one space. So for example, there might be a child in your classroom who has socially has a lot of power. The other students look up to him and, or her and or them, and they really follow that student's actions. And yet at the same time, that student might also be a student that has gotten a bunch of disciplinary infractions and feels sort of disempowered sometimes in another context, right? So there's multi-layers to it. So one of the tenets of dialogue is to create equal space for people to share and for their voices to be heard. And one of my the next thing I want to go over is sort of a restorative practice, doing a talking circle. And there's some things that you can do there that will help people feel a little bit of power equalization, in the space. And one of the things that I always encourage students to do is to reflect on, like if there's someone who feels really comfortable speaking up in a group and they always speak out and they speak first, to potentially wait a little bit, give a little bit more space to let other students speak. And if they're a student who feels very shy about speaking or hesitant about speaking, to consider speaking up. And I think the more trust and safety that you can create in an environment, the more comfortable people can feel, even when they feel like they are at a disadvantage, power wise. But I do think that it's something that is really important for us to be aware of and to ask ourselves the question, when we're facilitating a dialogue or when we're engaged in a dialogue, how might a power difference in this situation be affecting like our interactions, right? So either yours or the other person that you're with to like engage fully in that process. And I think just the awareness of it can lead into, again, creating a space that allows something new and different to happen. So thanks for the question.
Christa, there's one, Lauren left a comment or response in the chat.
Okay.
In response to what makes a conversation difficult.
Yes.
She shared not willing to try and change,
Mm-hmm.
being triggered, emotional, not ready to see a different perspective, not mutually agreeing on a resolution or solution.
Yep. All true. We have 2 slides on getting triggering, because I think emotions are probably the trickiest thing to manage and handle within conversations where there's disagreement, or people do feel somewhat like threatened in some way, and their sense of safety or their sense of identity or their sense of belonging in that space is threatened in some way. That causes a lot of very strong emotions. And we've all experienced this, right? We've all promised ourselves to not get into that argument with, that particular relative or somebody. And like it still happens, right? Like we lose control. And so one of the STL skills that is so important to help our students develop is just really the one of self-awareness of what's going on emotionally, and then self-management skills, right? So that they can handle those situations better. And a lot of the skills that are useful in dialogue are skills that can be practiced in many different contexts, not just when dialogue is happening, right? So all the other times when you're practicing respect, or even perspective taking exercise through literature, for example, right? Writing a story from another character's point of view. All those times when you're practicing those skills, the more you do it and help students be aware that that's the skill they're practicing, then they can bring that skill to the dialogue. One of the mistakes that I see educators make sometimes with SEL is that they feel like the skill has to be secret. Like we're going to teach students a skill, or we're going to work on it, but we're not going to name it or have them reflect on what skill they're using and how it's useful and what the impact is of that particular skill. And I think not, bringing awareness to those skill sets, which are really strengths that are then internal, that your students can bring with them wherever they go, whatever they do, which also is a very empowering way to experience this. as we develop those skills, they become our strengths that we bring to our relationships. Then when you're doing something like a dialogue and we're asking students to practice these skills, it's more tangible for them. Oh, that's the thing that, right, we practice that and we're going to try that here. So I recommend that as one thing people can do. Well, thanks. Thanks for those comments and everyone who shared and everyone else who's just also reflecting. Thanks for your engagement on that level too. Okay, so I want to talk about another strategy that's from restorative practices, which I know many of you probably are familiar with and use. Some of you maybe not. This picture is from my sister's second grade classroom, by the way, several years ago, when they were celebrating Dr. King Day and they were doing some activities and they took a picture of all their hands. I just really like it. Restorative practices basically focus on the importance of relationships, right? So the word restorative in this terminology refers to restoring relationships. And it very heavily focuses on belonging and inclusion. And this came from the restorative justice field. It was sort of an antidote to very harsh, punitive responses to misbehavior, and it basically understands infractions or misbehaviors not as a problem with the law, but as a problem with relationships. So it acknowledges that when there's an infraction, the impact has been on people. And so there's a desire to repair the harm and restore the relationship, hence the term restorative practices. So in any case, there's a lot of focus on dignity, responsibility, and belonging. And through these practices, we're creating trusting relationships and tending to them. So one of those practices is a talking circle. And this is a really wonderful form of dialogue practice that, again, uses guidelines. Often there is a talking piece. So you can choose a talking piece, and as the talking piece goes around the circle, each person has the opportunity to speak. They're not forced to speak. It's by choice. People share from their own experience. So again, very similar to dialogue. The sharing prompts are open-ended. And it becomes a regular classroom practice. So it does not have to only happen when there's a problem or when something goes wrong, but it can just be an everyday classroom practice to discuss everything from choices that are made in the classroom around seating, around which unit to study next. So kind of like technical classroom stuff to relationship issues in the classroom around fairness or around how material sharing is going, to opening up a dialogue around things that maybe happened in the community that are impacting students. So maybe there was something big that happened in the community that affected students. They're upset about it. You can do a talking circle. So it really is something that can be practiced all the time. And as you're engaging in it, of course, you're going to bring in all of those 5 CASTLE skills: self-awareness, other awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship. They're all in there. So I recently heard about a particular type of talking circle that I liked. It was in one of the books that I have on restorative practices by Nancy Riestenberg. Recently retired, I believe, but she is very, very well known in the restorative practice field for a long time. And it was called Stop Everything and Dialogue, SEAD. It was a school took it on as a weekly classroom and as a monthly school-wide practice. They had topics that were chosen by the staff and the student council, and they rotated. So one week the staff would choose it, another week the students would choose the topics. And they had circle prompts that they did in 3 rounds, which meant there were 3 go-arounds of the talking piece for these circles. The first prompt is just a general topic. The second is personalization, so asking students how that particular thing affects them. And the third one is a kind of futures-oriented question around how we can contribute to the collective good. considering this subject matter or topic. So if we look at that, again, here's one inclusion, so very similar to the belonging one, but what do you think inclusion means would be a general topic. So again, it could be anything. It could be around your character values you have in school. What do you think fairness means? What do you think kindness means? Just general. Personalization would be share a time when someone else helped you feel included, or share a time when you helped someone else feel included. So one of those. So that's a way to personalize it to their experience. And then third, how can they contribute to the collective good? What can you do to help others feel included here? Or what might we change in our school community or our classroom community to help you feel more included? So I just really like the way that this was arranged. And it, by the way, doesn't have to happen all at the same sitting, because it might feel like it's gonna take too long. You can have students journal on some of these topics first. If they're younger students, you can have them draw pictures. You could have them share their pictures. You could have them do a pair share activity. You could do responses on a poster and do a gallery walk, right? So even though this is a circle process, the circle process is just the container for the dialogue. It's just the container for fostering that particular kind of productive interaction. So you can use other containers if that fits your time scale better, or if it would work better for your age group or your students. Okay, so one thing I want to go over at the end here before we have to close, and it's about triggers. What happens when you get upset, or a colleague gets upset, or a student gets upset? First of all, it's completely 100% normal for people to get triggered. Another word for that is activated, because your nervous system gets activated by a topic or a subject matter. A lot of things can trigger people. It could be a particular word, a tone of voice, body language, subject matter. And what happens is we interpret it in a particular way. It's very, very fast. And our nervous system responds with a fight, flight, freeze. I have whole other workshops around nervous system regulation and everything, so I can't go into it too deep here, but you've all seen it and experienced it. We've all experienced going to fight, flight, freeze. We feel confused. Our heart rate goes up, right? Our body gets activated to either fight or get away. Or sometimes we can have more of a numbing or a freeze response. What happens when we get triggered is that our ability to think with our prefrontal cortex, which is our reasoning ability, and our language ability, that decreases. The activity in that part of our brain decreases. It gets very difficult to engage in productive conversation when we're triggered. We all know this because we've experienced it. So one thing to keep in mind around any of these topics, even if they seem like they're benign, inclusion seems maybe like it's a positive topic, but what about kids who felt really excluded, right? Good thing to keep in mind is that some students or people will be more easily triggered by certain subject matter because they feel wounded or harmed in some area of their life. And because of that wounding, they're on alert. Their nervous system is on high alert for anything that sort of is like that or is similar to it in some way. Because this fear, fight, flight, freeze response we have is kind of crude. It's a little general. It's for survival. So its default is to kick in quickly and easily. It doesn't want a lot of like nuance holding that response up, right? Like, did they really mean that? Maybe they didn't. Maybe there's another reason, right? We're not doing that when we get triggered. So triggering can happen. It can happen to anyone. The basic thing I would say is to try to have compassion when triggering happens, because most people feel very uncomfortable when they get triggered. A lot of people, they're unable to communicate effectively, so their words are not going to make a lot of sense. And it can feel really embarrassing to students if they start crying or if they get really mad, because for a lot of reasons, a lot of our social norms around emotions and how we show them in different places. So you really want to help students save face when they're feeling triggered, meaning don't make it into a bigger deal than it has to be. Allow them to save face. Like everybody gets upset. This looks like it's really hard right now. Let's take a pause. Allow that student to take a break and help them practice a strategy to re-regulate their nervous system. The go-to, by the way, is, get a cold drink of water, right? Like I think teachers have been using this technique for as long as water fountains have been accessible to everyone at schools. And that's actually a pretty good strategy because it's a physiological signal to the body that the body is not needing to respond in an emergency setting. Because when you're in fight, flight, freeze, you don't sit down to drink or eat, because then you wouldn't be helping keep yourself safe, right? So when you introduce food or water into your system, it's actually a message to your nervous system that it can start to regulate. So that's a super easy one, but of course, a lot of you who are engaged in SEL have many, many more strategies. I have a whole other workshop on chill strategies and things like that, but I just wanted to mention this here because especially students that might feel targeted in some way because of their identity and different things like that, they might become more easily triggered. And it's a very uncomfortable position to be in front of a group of students. So you modeling the acceptance and the compassion and helping them move towards down regulation, I think is a really good signal to other students for how they should behave in that situation. And then you can revisit later. So maybe revisit the topic, maybe have a private meeting with the student, and see if the productive conversation can continue. Okay, so I just want to say one or two things as I wrap up here. So there's a lot here, and there's more than we could possibly do, right? We can't fix all the problems and make all wonderful idealistic dialogues happening all the time. So this is from, you might know Stephen Covey's work, your circle of concern versus your circle of control. And I've recently been revisiting this in light of everything that's going on, because a lot of things seem to be outside of my control, but I'm concerned about them, like really concerned about them, but they're not in my sphere of influence or control. And so it's very helpful to focus on things you can control. So there might be one or two new strategies you can use, or something that you can change in your classroom to facilitate more dialogue, and just start there and choose that. And there's always going to be the things that we can't change and we don't have control over. And again, that's us standing in that tragic gap that stretches us. But if you can revisit your own commitment to this work and your students and why we're all doing this together, then I hope that can be something that's helpful to you. So lastly, I will just share this quote about courage, because I think that real dialogue takes courage. I think it takes the willingness to be vulnerable and to show up and to try something that we hope will work. And so courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a little voice at the end of the day that says, I'll try again tomorrow. So just a word of encouragement to try something new. It may not always work perfectly, but you remain committed to your values and you can certainly try again tomorrow. And I think that's why I admire educators so much, because you show up day after day. So thank you so much. I will be sending out an additional list of resources with some of the descriptions of those dialogue tools for you, as well as this PowerPoint after the session is done. But I will break there because these are the additional tools I will send. But I'm going to break there because I know you probably have some announcements you want to make at the end of the session. So I will turn it over to Liz, I guess. Is that
Yep, yep,
okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Christa. And it just helps. I mean, the whole thing was absolutely fascinating. And I think I've heard some of this before that you've shared, but hearing it again is just just so many tools, tips, techniques that we can all embrace all the time. And I think the concept that you shared of the tragic gap is so apropos, because if you're just kind of recognizing and naming and labeling where you are, it just is the first foundational step in just making things better and including people. So thank you so much. That was just fabulous. And as Christa shared, Leanna's going to be sending this all out to everyone later on. And, if you'd like to get in contact with Christa, please reach out to us. We can totally connect you. So we are just thrilled. So thank you so much, Christa. Super, super appreciated. And so what I'm going to do, I took all sorts of notes because I think I need to practice a lot of this dialogue at the moment. So that's fabulous.
Totally agree. And you were talking about our kitchen at my house, Christa, when you're talking about wondering what to add to my perfect blueberry muffin recipe that my husband always chimes in on.
No more debate. It's going to be.
Why don't we put like turmeric into a blueberry
Oh, okay. So just to wrap us up, a couple of things just to have on your radar screen, if they're not on your radar screen already. SEL Day 2025 is coming up next week, and it is kicking off. SEL Day is Monday, March 3rd, which is a new thing for you people who might be familiar with it. And it's kicking off the entire week, which is called SEL Week. And I'll be talking in just a jiffy about exactly what SEL Day is. But if you haven't joined in and signed up for SEL Day, really encourage you to do so. It's selday.org. And once you go on there, you can sign up, and there's tons of resources and information. But SEL Day is really, we're in its fifth or sixth year. And it was the original vision was for it to provide a venue, a vehicle to celebrate and highlight the amazing SEL work going on every day in schools around the country, around the world. And it's been incredibly successful, much more successful than I think the people who originally had the idea thought it was going to be. Back when it was originally thought about 5 years ago, Twitter was the social media platform that was used to kind of measure the reach of SEL Day. Things have moved on. So now it's more from a day to a week. But the idea is that you within your schools and communities are doing so many wonderful things all the time. And Christa, the photo you shared of your sister's classroom during Dr. King's, that would be a perfect thing to share on SEL Day. And it's basically just to send it out to a school community, hashtag SEL Day, hashtag SEL4NJ, if you wouldn't mind. I'm not important. And then it's just shared around the world. And we're very proud to say New Jersey has always been a leader in this. And it's just a wonderful way, a feel-good way of just sharing what is SEL broadly defined and what does it really look like? It looks like people being kind to one another, to be people having fun. It's all of those things. So please sign up. We'd love you to. There's 250 schools in New Jersey as of this morning who are currently signed up. And also Governor Murphy has issued a proclamation saying that SEL Day is officially March 3rd, 2025. And likewise, the State Board of Education today at 11 a.m. issued a resolution stating that SEL week day is, I don't know, they went with the week or they decided March 5th was SEL Day. Doesn't really matter. We're just thrilled they've done that. So there's a lot of support across the state. And also, for those of you who may be on from Wisconsin, Governor Evers, he has signed an SEL Day proclamation as well, which we're very grateful for. So it's really kind of fun. And the idea is that to just create an artifact, so a video, a photo, anything you'd like, and share it on during SEL week and hashtag SEL Day, hashtag SEL4NJ. The SEL Day is the really important one. And also, this is really important. If you've enjoyed and found useful today's session, and if you've enjoyed other SSN PD, SEL4NJ is bringing 9 webinars that are free. We'll be broadcasting on between March 4th and March 7th. And they're wonderful speakers. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Stuart Green. He's the founder of the Anti-Bullying Coalition. He speaks very passionately. Patrick Fennell, a part of the School Culture and Climate Initiative, will be doing something on the importance of hope and perseverance. Likewise, one of our consultants, Erica, that Christa referenced, will be doing in fact, the same presentation that Christa referenced on cell phone use, social media use, and SEL. And so and that's just to name a few. There's a great one on AI as well. So really encourage you to check out the webinars. You just have to register. They're free. You can go to sel4nj.org to get the agenda, but also it's linked here, and Leanne will be sending out the links and the descriptions and the times with our follow-up.
And yes, to a couple of chat folks,
Right.
it does conflict with Read Across America, and it has since it started. I love Leslie's idea to incorporate Read Across America and SEL skills development all together for the week.
Love it.
Great idea. Great way.
Yeah. Last year, SEL Day was on International Women's Day as well. So but one of the reasons we moved SEL Day from a Friday to a Monday was to be more inclusive of our international friends and colleagues. So it's just so fun to see, because everybody hashtags SEL Day. So it's so great to see the work that's being done. Last year, Ukraine shared a bunch of really cool stuff, Taiwan, Sweden, all over the world. So it's really, really so neat. It's a really feel good day and week. And yeah, we just love to see what you guys are doing. So, and no project's too small. A photo is fine. Some schools just do a photo of a teacher with a bunch of cute kids making heart signs. Others suspend classes, like really no joke, for the entire week and do an assembly every single day based on a different SEL competency. And one school had a marching band, they had poetry, like slams, all about SEL skills. So people can go wild, or people can just share the love. So it's really whatever works for you. It's not meant to be a heavy lift unless you're getting a ton of energy from that heavy lift. So also, there is funding available for this kind of work, school culture and climate work. Our great friends and partners at New Jersey Sustainability for Schools offer grants for all sorts of actions, including school climate assessment, how to create a socially inclusive school, as well as integrated SEL. Their deadline is coming up, but the grants are usually $2,500 or $10,000, and they give away a lot of them. And there's always seems to be a grant cycle open. So really check out New Jersey Sustainability for Schools if you have not already. And these are the dates. This is really important. We hope you'll be able to join us for a drop-in session just to connect and share. There's a lot of things going on out in the world that can be unsettling. And during these unsettling times, connection is more important than ever. And we're just so we're so grateful that we're able to offer these sessions for people to come around and just connect, see how things are going in other schools, just get support from one another. And these are the upcoming dates. We have 3 coming up in March, so please join us. And then next week, or next month for the SSN, will be one of our consultants, Stacy Strominger, who will be talking about strengthening family and community partnerships. Really, really important. And that's, you should all see the details of that. And Leanne will be sending out the registration links for all of this. So I think we are just about done. And if you wouldn't mind at all, we would love you to take a few minutes and complete the evaluation, because that's how we figure out what you guys want to hear about. It's so important that we kind of get your feedback about what's going on in your school, what's our priority, what we can do better. It'd be fabulous. So I'm just going to leave that QR code up and want to thank you all. Oops, sorry. for, I don't know if I did. There we go, for joining us. And yeah, next time we'll probably be seeing you, it'll be March, given this is the last week of February. So spring, it will be springing maybe.
And thank you again, Christa.
Thanks again for having me. It was wonderful.
Yeah, super appreciated. Super, super appreciated. And thank you all for joining us. So we'll just leave the QR code up in case you guys want to grab it before you sign off. Oh, sorry.